Right, lesson 8. Strangely enough, it follows on from lesson 7. Now, in lesson 7, we were talking about aperture priority, setting your camera on half automatic, if you like, halfway to automatic or halfway to manual. So, we were talking about the way that the aperture works with shutter speed and the reverse. Now, that was fine. If you haven't watched lesson 7, it's up there on the screen. Watch it because it's important. This whole thing is important. We're now going to be talking about ISO and how ISO affects it, because that's the third part of the triangle, as we said. So we'll have a quick look at that, and then I'll show you how to set the camera and what we see through the viewfinder, etc., etc. And that will all help you get onto semi-automatic. And then I can only say it's up to you, go out and try it. Now this is where we left the diagram in lesson 7. So we're going to clean it up a bit because we're going to need a bit more room. So let's just whip out the shutter speed and the at, because we're going to replace it with that nasty thing we know about, which is ISO. Up 100 ISO. Now 100 ISO is about the lowest a camera will go, and of course that means it's the best quality. Now 100 or 200, to be quite honest, I can't see the difference, but 100 is supposed to be better. We're going to concentrate on f11. Now why are we going to concentrate on f11? Because frankly, it's what I want to shoot at. I have decided, I've got aperture priority, I've set the camera to shoot at f11, whatever. It will only ever shoot at f11 when it's set like that. I've also set it at 100 ISO, so nothing is going to change that either. So we'll have a look at 200 ISO. What's going to happen if we do 200 ISO? We're bringing back our f-stops, and we'll bring back the shutter speeds as they were, and I'll show you what will actually happen. The camera will automatically go to there. The difference, one stop. The difference between 100 ISO and 200 ISO is one stop. The light has doubled. Because the light has doubled, we've gone from 125th of a second to a 250th of a second. If we change from 200 ISO to 400 ISO, then this, of course, will go that way as well. As will 800 ISO. We're getting more and more sensitive on the sensor. So this is going to take us up to 1,000th of a second at f11. Now, 1,000th of a second, you'll be able to stop most things. You'll stop wheels on motorbikes, you'll certainly stop helicopters, that happens about 125th. Now all this means that the only controls I've got actually is the ISO and the aperture. Now I can change those as I want, but probably you'd leave the ISO for all the time until you need to increase it for some reason. The f-stop, I've decided f11, but just by turning a wheel on the camera I can make that whatever I want, and of course the shutter speed is going to change in relationship. Makes it very easy. Now how do I choose what aperture I want? Well, really it's a question of deciding whether you want the background out of focus, because we talked about the byproduct in lesson 7 of aperture. So we've got the byproduct, which is the depth of field, the amount that's in focus, if you like, on the picture. And the distance, it really means the distance between the nearest point and the furthest point where something is in focus. Now you can increase or decrease that with the aperture. The wider the aperture, the more it is open, the less the depth of field. Now you might find that's a disadvantage. Well, it isn't, because if you want nice out of focus backgrounds, That's how you do it. If you're shooting, for example, a landscape and you want it all in focus, then you can close down to f16 or f22, let very little light through the lens. The shutter speed will change. Now, if the shutter speed is too slow for you to hand hold it, what do? You increase the ISO. That gives more sensitivity on the sensor. Hey, Bob's your uncle, as they say. I haven't got an uncle called Bob. Right. Now we'll have a look at how it changes in the camera. That might give you an idea. I know I'm continuing all the same thing, but I say it all the time. It is so important. We'll have a look in the camera. Whoops! Oh, the wrong camera. Oh, mind you, it's better than watching me. Well, here's the look we get through the viewfinder. Now the problem is it's very difficult to film through a viewfinder, so you have to put up with the quality, I'm afraid. Well, that's the view you get. Now I'll just show you quickly going through numbers. Now we'll talk about this in a second. You'll see that it's all moving very fast, but we'll now do a few stills. Now firstly I should say that it's much more efficient to be looking through the viewfinder than looking at a screen on the back of the camera. A, it looks more professional. B, it's a lot quicker to use it this way. And C, if you've got a very long telephoto lens, I defy anyone to hold it at arm's length so you can see the screen on the back. So always use the viewfinder unless you've got a very good reason. Now what we're seeing here on the right hand side, a lot of people don't really know what that means. That 6 means that I can take 6 frames a second at that exposure. As I change the exposure, that figure might change to 7 or 8 or 5 or 4. But that's the maximum amount of pictures I can take. Next to that, the ISO 250. Well, that speaks for itself. That means I've got the ISO set on 250. We've got a graduated scale. Now in aperture priority, that should stay exactly as it is. If it's to the left or to the right, that means that you've got an exposure compensation set on your camera. So it should be in the middle and it should stay in the middle as long as there's enough light to take the picture or not, or if there's not enough light to take the picture. The 22, well, that's obviously the F number, and that will change as I turn a wheel on the camera because I'm in aperture priority. But we're set up for aperture priority, so if I change the aperture, the speed setting will change with it. I don't have to set that. I'm only setting the aperture. I'm going through it and through it and through it again. Well, if you're bored, this one's for the girls, or, well, you know what I mean. Now the next one is obviously shutter speed, the 125. The little box next to it is flash and flash compensation, and of course the one on the end is the battery. Well, that's easy enough. So if I turn my aperture wheel, we'll see what happens. You see it changes to f16 and 250th of a second. And then if I go down one more, we go to f11, which makes 500ths of a second. Now, that of course goes on and on. That all depends how I turn my f-stop wheel. Now, they're all in different places on different cameras, so you just have to look at your instruction book, I'm afraid. You'll find that there's intermediate stops as well, but the thing is not to get confused. My camera's set to third of stops, so it will read, for example, 11, 12, 14 and then go to 16, and that's the difference between 11 and 16, but we're only talking about third of a stop between those. Don't worry about those, just set it to what you want. The shutter speed will change with it to be right. So a quick look how we set it up, very simple. All we do is put it on the AV on the Canon, which is there. So that's the AV. I don't know what it is on a Nikon, Sony, Pentax and all the others, but it's, you have to look in your book. Another important button is ISO, which is this one. Now if I press that while I'm looking through the viewfinder, then I can just change the ISO exactly the same, and we see it changing the viewfinder. So that makes it easy. And then you can switch by pressing that button, you can switch straight back to changing aperture. So very, very simple. Every camera will be different. By the way, the aperture that I use to change is this one, and it's just there. Now, if you get to know your camera, you'll find out where those buttons are, and it's very simple. Now, I'm sorry of being so insistent and so repetitive, but the lessons 7 and 8 are so important to understand. If you don't understand something, don't hesitate to ask me a question. But the most important thing is to practice. Normally, you should be able to look through that camera, find the right buttons, turn the right wheels, and things will change like that, rather than having to look in the back and go, oh, I need to change that one, etc. Do it, practice it, and then you'll be able to move on to full manual if you want to. I very rarely use full manual. It would be nice if you shared the video, and certainly subscribe if you're not used to me. Just subscribe. Have a great day. Practice, 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 and I'll see you soon.